There are places on Earth where silence speaks the loudest, where the forest breathes, where shadows move, and where sometimes something falls from the sky. January 1996. In the heart of Brazil, a strange object crashed near a small town called Varginha. What followed would become one of the most terrifying and mysterious UFO stories in history. Officially, nothing happened. But the witnesses say otherwise. A red-eyed creature seen by children, military trucks arriving without warning, bodies not human carried through hospital halls, and a silence forced upon anyone who dared speak. Tonight on X-Site, we reopen the file they tried to bury and ask the question, what really crashed in the Amazon? It started with a radar signal. On January 13, 1996, NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, detected something strange entering Earth's atmosphere. It wasn't a missile, it wasn't a satellite, and it was moving too fast to be any known aircraft. The object was last seen over southeastern Brazil before it vanished from radar. Minutes later, in the countryside near Varginha, something fell from the sky. Local farmer Aurelina was outside feeding her animals when she saw it, a dark, spinning object trailing smoke. Her animals panicked. The air filled with a foul, burning smell. Moments later, a loud crash echoed across the hills. Her husband, Yuriko, saw it too. "It wasn't a plane," he said later. "It looked broken, like it was falling apart." By nightfall, the military had arrived. Soldiers blocked roads, helicopters circled above. Trucks rolled through fields loaded with equipment, but they weren't alone. One man, Carlos, had reached the crash site before the soldiers. He saw twisted, silver debris scattered in the grass. He picked up a piece. It was warm, light like foil. When he crumpled it, it returned to its original shape. Before he could take it home, two men in black suits approached. They knew his name, his address, even his sister's name. "Forget what you saw," one of them said, "for your own good." That night, Carlos left town, and the cover-up had begun. In the quiet town of Varginha, the morning after the crash felt different. The air was heavier, the birds silent, and in certain corners of the city, people whispered of shapes moving where nothing should be. Three girls, Lillian, Valkyria, and Keisha, were walking home from the store. They laughed about something silly. The sun was high, but the streets felt strangely cold. As they cut through a vacant lot filled with weeds and broken bricks, they stopped. At first, they thought it was a dog hiding in the tall grass, but then it moved. Slowly, upright. The thing crouching there was not human. It was small, no taller than 5 feet, with dark, oily brown skin that reflected light like polished stone. Its head was large and bald, with 3 strange ridges rising from its crown like bone. But what froze the girls in place were its eyes. Huge, red, wet with fear. The creature looked at them, but not with hostility. It looked hurt, confused, and afraid. None of the girls screamed. None of them ran. They stood, trapped in the creature's gaze, as if some invisible force held them still. One of them, Keisha, later said she felt something in her mind, like a voice without sound. "Don't hurt me," it said. "I'm lost." Then in a heartbeat, the spell broke. The girls gasped, turned, and ran all the way home. Lillian's mother said they burst in, crying and shaking, unable to form words. And yet by evening, they weren't the only ones with a story. That same day, a college student claimed he saw something crouching behind a dumpster in an alley near the park. He described the same oily skin, the same long fingers, the same red, panicked eyes. At first, no one believed him, until the hospital reports started coming in. That night, staff at a local hospital received an unusual call. Military trucks were heading their way with patients. The nurses thought it was a drill until the trucks arrived. Soldiers stepped out. Then came something else on a stretcher covered in a silver sheet. Some staff were ordered to leave, others stayed behind, and what they saw was burned into memory. One nurse said the being was alive, barely. Its chest moved with effort. Its body was thin, too thin. The skin was damp and rough, like nothing she had ever seen. Its limbs were long and fragile. And its head still watched them with wide, unblinking eyes. She reached out just once and it looked at her. And for a moment she didn't feel fear, she felt sorrow. Then the soldiers pushed her away. She was told to leave immediately. Not to speak, not to return. By morning, the hospital wing was locked down, security doubled. Patients were moved, cameras shut off, but rumors always leak. And soon, everyone in Varginha was talking. About the strange thing in the alley, about the soldiers at the hospital, and about the creature that did not come here to harm, but was now trapped in a world that did not understand it. By the third day, Varginha was no longer quiet. The story of the 3 girls had spread across town. Local newspapers printed cautious headlines. People whispered about strange lights, crashed metal, and a creature now hidden in military hands. But soon, those who had spoken began to vanish from public view. Carlos, the man who had picked up the strange metal near the crash site, stopped going to work. His neighbors said 2 men in dark suits had visited his home late at night. The next morning, his car was gone. No one saw him again. A young nurse from the hospital told her cousin what she had witnessed, that she had touched the creature's skin. Hours later, military officers arrived at her house. She was not arrested, but she was warned. Her family said she didn't sleep that night. She stared at the walls. She said only one thing before breaking down. "They know everything about me." At a small bar downtown, a local news photographer showed his friend a blurry picture. He said he had snapped it through a fence, an image of a wounded, reddish figure being moved on a gurney. He said he planned to sell it to the press. But he never did. 2 days later, he left town without a word. His apartment was empty. His camera, gone. What was happening was clear to those who paid attention. Someone was erasing the truth. One of the girl's uncles tried to call a journalist in Sao Paulo. His phone lines were tapped. He began receiving strange calls at night, silent except for heavy breathing. One night while driving, he noticed headlights behind him. They stayed close, too close. When he turned into a side street, the car followed. He never made it home that night. The next day, his vehicle was found parked outside town, empty. Inside the glove box was a folded note. Just 4 words, "You saw too much." Meanwhile, military activity around Varginha only increased. Soldiers were stationed at roadblocks outside the town. Trucks carrying unmarked crates rolled through the streets at night. Locals said they saw helicopters flying low, scanning the forest. Some even claimed they saw strange shapes moving in the trees, like shadows with eyes. And then came the blackout. One night, without warning, the power across Varginha cut out completely. Phones stopped working. The air felt heavy. Dogs howled in the dark. That night, no one slept, and by morning, something had changed. The streets were quieter. The rumors had stopped. People avoided eye contact. A silence had fallen, thick and unnatural. Whatever had fallen from the sky, whatever had crawled out of that wreckage, it was now locked away. And those who had seen it were either silenced or gone. The crash had happened. The creature had been seen. The military had arrived. And then official silence. Within a week, the Brazilian government issued a short statement. They said what people saw in Varginha was a misunderstanding. No UFO. No creature, just confusion, heat, and hysteria. But the people knew better. They had seen the trucks. They had heard the screams. They had touched the wreckage. And behind closed doors, someone else had seen even more. A technician at the hospital. who had worked in the security room, watched the security cameras on the night the military arrived. He saw something strange. One of the stretchers carried not a patient, but something wrapped in silver. Something that moved. He burned a copy of the footage onto a tape, and then he vanished. Later, a journalist in Sao Paulo received a package. Inside was a letter, no return address. It read, "They lied, this was real, protect this." Attached was the tape, but before the journalist could publish it, his office was raided. All computers wiped. Tape gone. The journalist survived, but he never spoke publicly again. Meanwhile, a group of amateur UFO researchers had started to collect testimony. They visited witnesses in secret. They gathered drawings, photos, dates, even soil samples from the crash site. One photo showed a military crate being loaded onto a plane at a local airstrip. On its side was a warning in English: "Biological material, top secret." Another witness, a janitor at the military base, told researchers he had seen the crate opened briefly. Inside was something pale, long, wrapped in clear plastic. He was transferred the next day. No one ever heard from him again. But despite all the fear, one file escaped. 10 years after the incident, a Brazilian military document was leaked by an anonymous source. It detailed an aerial event of unknown origin on January 13, 1996, detected by NORAD and tracked over Sao Paulo. The report included mention of foreign biological entities recovered by special forces. It listed their size, condition, and recommendations for containment. The final page was blacked out, except for one line: "Do not engage without protocol. Entities are intelligent." That document was confirmed by 2 retired officers, and when pressed for more answers, one of them simply said, "What we found wasn't from here." But by then it was too late. The creature had disappeared, the story had been buried, and the world had moved on, or so they thought. Years passed, the world moved on. The Varginha incident faded from headlines, buried under politics, scandals, and silence. But in the shadows, the story never stopped. Whispers began to spread among retired military men. Late-night radio hosts received anonymous calls. Old witnesses started speaking again, quietly, nervously, off the record. And then one man broke the silence. His name was Sergio Lima, a former soldier who had been stationed at ESA, Brazil's Army School of Administration, in 1996. Now in his 60s, Sergio sat down with a journalist from an independent news site. He didn't want money. He didn't want fame. He just wanted to tell the truth. "We were told it was an exercise," he said. "But when I got close, I knew it was." Sergio described the night the creature was brought to the base. He was ordered to guard a hallway. No one was allowed through except officers and men in hazmat suits. They rolled in a steel chamber sealed tight. It made no sound until they opened it. "It cried," Sergio said, his eyes wet. "It didn't scream like an animal. It cried like a child, like it was afraid." He never saw what was inside, but he heard it and he never forgot. Days later, the chamber was gone. The officers said nothing. But for weeks, Sergio dreamed of red eyes staring back at him in the dark. Others told similar stories. A medic remembered a body in a quarantine room, too long, too thin, skin like wax. A cleaner said the creature was alive, hooked to machines. It blinked, it breathed. And then one day it was gone. Some say it died, some say it was taken. But Sergio, he believed something else. He said one of the doctors, the last one to enter the sealed room, left the army a month later. Quietly. No explanation, no forwarding address. 10 years later, that same doctor was found in rural Argentina, living alone. He had no visitors, no phone, just notebooks filled with drawings of a creature with large red eyes. On the final page, written in shaky Portuguese, was a single line. "He's not gone, he's learning." The files may have been destroyed, the witnesses may have been silenced, but something survived, and it was never meant to. It began with a light in the sky. Not in Brazil this time, but in a remote village in northern Portugal, 10 years after Varginha. Locals reported a glowing sphere hovering over a forest ridge. It made no sound. It didn't blink. It simply hovered, watching. Then came the second light. Then a third. 3 nights later, animals began disappearing from nearby farms. One farmer found his cattle terrified, huddled against the fence, refusing to eat. He also found strange footprints in the mud, long, 3-toed, with no known match in any animal database. He told the police. They told him it was nothing, but he knew better because he had grown up in Brazil. And he had heard the stories from Varginha. Then came the reports from Colombia, Chile, northern Argentina. Witnesses described the same red-eyed figure, small, fragile, moving with strange grace, always near the edges of forests or small towns. In Bolivia, a miner working late said he saw one crouching in a mine tunnel. It stared at him for a moment, then vanished without a trace. Each time the pattern repeated: strange lights, military presence, official silence. And then one day, a journalist in Brazil received a package. Inside was a notebook, old, torn, covered in dirt. The return address? None. The postmark? Varginha. Inside the notebook were hand-drawn maps, charts, and one final message. It never left, it just waited. Satellite data from the region confirmed unusual heat signatures in the forest outside Varginha. No wildfires, no activity, just heat slowly pulsing like breath. And in a series of leaked photos, blurry low light taken at night, one showed what looked like a shape behind the trees. Not human, not animal, still watching. Experts tried to dismiss it. But those who had seen the original creature, those who had felt its fear, knew the truth. It was back, or worse. It had never left. The creature was never confirmed, the files were never released, and the government said it was all just a misunderstanding, but the people of Varginha still remember. The children, the nurse, the soldier with a voice shaking from guilt. They all told the same story, of something not from here, something afraid, and something that vanished without a trace. Years later, the signs returned, lights in the forest, strange footprints, and eyes red and watching from the trees. Some believe the being died, others say it escaped, but those who were there, they know one truth: it never left. Clapperboard X site, True Encounters, Deeper Truths. Subscribe to uncover what others hide.